What's happening, guys? Cooper Carter here for G66, and on this week's Fractal Friday, I'm going to take you inside my good friend Armin J's main live preset that we designed together for him to use with Dashboard Confessional, and I'm going to show you guys how we blended two really beautiful amp models together to lend a vintage sort of vibe to what's otherwise a modern alternative rock set. I've spent the majority of this year so far jumping between different Fractal artists' rehearsals, designing sounds for those shows, most of which are now out on the road for the summer. So you've probably noticed that most of the Fractal Fridays have been featuring those different artists and the tones we've been dialing in out on the road. But I am back here in the studio this week, and I want to take you inside Armin J's preset that we're using for Dashboard Confessional. If you missed the video of him playing through that preset on a Fractal Friday a couple weeks ago, the link is in the video description. But many of you guys asked to see what was inside of that preset. I was really thrilled to see the response to some more middle gain kind of stuff. The Fractals obviously made their bones on super high gain stuff. You were able to dial in incredibly high gain and keep it very tight and very quiet. But what I wish many people knew more about Fractal, and what I really encourage a lot of people to explore, is the vintage amps in the unit. They are beautifully realized. They are absolutely incredible replicas of these amazing vintage amps, and we turned to two of those for AJ's main preset. So let's dive into that. So I've got AJ's bank file pulled up here, and as you can see, we have a different preset for every song in the Dashboard Confessional set, and then we have two presets up here, AJ Main and AJ Verb. The AJ Main is essentially the template preset from which we have built all of these different songs. So there really are four core tones, and different songs get maybe some different effects or some slight changes to the amps or maybe the drive pedals to fit them with the needs of that song. We also enter a different tempo, BPM, for each of these songs so that everything syncs up delay-wise for leads and special effects and that kind of thing. And some of these songs have crystals or other things that you heard in AJ's video when he was playing through the tones. But what I'm going to do is actually go to this AJ main preset and just take you through how we built out this preset. Now, as you can see, routing-wise, this preset is very straightforward. Now, of course, we are using two amps, which we'll get into in a second. But with this, it really is the science of 1,000 details. The devil really is in the details here, because this preset at first glance is fairly straightforward. But we spent an entire day arriving at this core set of four tones here: the clean, the drive, which is just the same amps with the drive pedal turned on, the drive and delay, and then the lead solo sound, which has a special filter block here. This is the result of hundreds and hundreds of very small tweaks across the various parameters of the amplifiers and the effects to really get this preset where AJ feels that it can be used more or less across the entire set, again, with some changes here and there for specific songs. But we are treating this rig very much like there are physical amplifiers on stage, analog amplifiers, and you don't want to really be changing those throughout the set. So he had to be really happy with these core tones. So we spent a lot of time dialing them in here. The lifeblood of this preset really is these two amplifiers right here, the 59 Bass Guy Bright, which is, of course, based on the 1959 Fender Bassman, and then the 5F8 Tweed Normal here in the second amp slot, which is a direct model of Keith Urban's personal 1959 Fender Twin. These are two of my absolute favorite amp types. Now, the big question that I got on AJ's Tone Tour video was, how are you getting the Axe-Fx to sound so, quote, vintage? There really is no secret here, guys. I am just using vintage amps, and the models of these amplifiers are so well done that they instantly evoke the vintage sound, because these are old amps. They're from 1959, both of these, and they are literally modeled after those specific physical amps in the real world. So to get a vintage sound, use vintage amps. There is a huge array of amazing vintage amps in this unit. And, as so often is the case with Fractal stuff, I think people assume that it's this modern digital machine, but the technology is at the point where it can beautifully capture vintage sounds. So we've got the 59 bass guy, we've got the Tweed, and then each of those two is running into the same cab here. We're using a 410 bass guy P10. This is a legacy cab that was available in the Axe-Fx II. AJ used that sound for so long that we really decided there was no reason to change it. We really like what this cab has done for the last several years, and it's going to keep doing it live. This is based off of the 410 Bassman cab that had Jensen Alnico speakers in it way back in the day. Classic amplifier, classic cabinet combo here. And you'll notice we do have the same cab here, and this cab actually persists across all of the main sounds. I love how many cabs we have in the Fractal, and some bands that I work with do want to change up the cabinets depending on what kind of sound they're going for. For this project, we really wanted to have cohesion across all of the sounds, and one of the best ways to do that, even if you're experimenting with different amps or wildly different effects, is to pick a cabinet you really like and stick with it. And that can really help just align all of the different sounds and glue them together into one kind of cohesive set, and also cuts down on what I sometimes refer to as like sonic whiplash for the audience, where, you know, the guitar tone changes so drastically that they all of a sudden feel like maybe it's a completely separate band on stage. That obviously can be exactly what you want for some parts, but in this case, we wanted everything to be a little bit more cohesive, so we've stuck with one cab here. So let's listen to what we have here with this clean. And this is, again, the core tone that all the rest of the sounds are based off of. So I'm going to bypass this delay. We've got a little compression, beauty of Fractal world here. We're using a Studio FB compressor, which is much more the kind of thing you'd see in the studio than live. But obviously, we don't have to take out a rack compressor. We've got it right here in our compressor block. So here is the clean sound. And I can play you each of those amps separately. So here is just the Bassman, or the bass guy. Really spanky. It's got a great upper mid thing and a nice sparkle going on. And then here is just the 5F8 Tweed. A little darker, a little spongier, a little more compressed. And so when those two come together, you're really getting the best of both worlds. We are using these as much for the sound that you're getting from each of those amps coming together to create a whole, as we are for the feel of each of those being a little bit different. So you really are getting a chunky sound that you can dig into, but also one that has a lot of sparkle, a lot of bite. We're really combining the best elements of these two amps. And this is the kind of thing where we would go, okay, 4.13 is where we're at right now. The numbers aren't so important as how it feels, but, you know, bringing it down a point or 2 points, playing on that, seeing how it feels, bringing it up a point or 2 points, and seeing what happens, and really kind of massaging each of these knobs until it sat right, with an eye not only toward how this sounded as a clean, but also how it would sound when we put a drive on it, because that is the distortion tone for the set. It's these two clean amps. And that, to me, is just a glorious overdriven tone. We're using here the Esoteric ACB, based on, of course, the Exotic AC booster, or almost clean. This is an incredibly versatile drive pedal, and we are using it here really to just boost up the amp, give it a little bit of grit, but this is still very much kind of mid-gain territory. And it cleans up very well. So I roll my volume knob off and so we've got a clean tone here, and if I turn on this delay, which he selects between either a stereo tape or this analog mono, so we'll turn that on. Another way to keep this rig sounding more analog, more organic, more vintage, pick your word, but we use the analog mono delay here, which does shave off a considerable amount of high end in the repeats here. There is also a little bit of drive happening to just warm up the repeats, and a little bit of companding as well. I really love this delay. It sounds super warm. Really, really nice there, and it works beautifully on this clean. The reverb here is the Sun Plate, which I find myself turning to quite a bit. It really just sounds natural, and we have it set to where it's really just enhancing the tone. It's not so much an effect. It's not really an aggressive reverb, but it makes it sit really nicely in the mix. I do tend to make things a little bit wetter live than people might think, because depending on the venues that you're playing, the crowd can really soak up a lot of that reverb. The room can soak it up. And ironically, usually a wetter room in general will need a little bit more reverb. It just needs to be EQ'd right so that it doesn't get muddy. But don't be afraid of reverb and delay live, especially if you're playing bigger rooms, because they can get lost. Small, sterile rooms, they tend to sound a little cheesy if you have too much of them. But bigger rooms, it can actually play well to turn them up counterintuitively. Going up from the drive to this drive and delay, again, this is just the same sound, but this big delay comes on. This is the kind of thing that AJ would use to go into a big chorus. You notice also the stereo enhancer comes on. This is just set at totally default levels. This can really take it to the next level going into a big chorus from the verse. It just opens the whole thing up. Everyone in the audience, especially if they're standing in the middle of the venue and there's a stereo board, a stereo PA, they'll all just feel their heads kind of expand and open up. And the player, especially on in-ear monitors, will really hear this effect. And it's just a great lift to your confidence, to your emotions. You hit the big chorus and the whole tone opens wide. The last of the four main tones on scenes here is the solo tone. A big Plex delay gets brought in, and then this filter block also comes in. And the filter here is doing the job basically of an input EQ with a little bit of boost. Now, some filter blocks for solo boosts are placed after the amp and cab. If you will just want a transparent level boost, you would use a null filter here. And you would just set it completely flat and then use the level here to just bring up your guitar in the mix. But here we're boosting not only the level of the signal into the amplifiers themselves, but we're also boosting some of the upper mids into the amps to add a little bit of sparkle, to add a little bit of focus to the sound, to really just give it a little bit of lift. Now, each of these amplifiers actually already has some input EQ happening in the upper mids. You see you've got a 3.5 dB increase in gain on the Bassman, and then you've got about a 3 dB gain boost here going into the Twin. And these are happening at slightly different frequencies with slightly different cues and a little bit of low cutting happening as well. This again was really just kind of massage dialed in as AJ was playing, and we moved the knobs until he was happy with how it felt and how it sounded. You're gonna see input EQ boosts like this on almost every preset that I design. This is just one of my little go-to tricks to really make the guitar not only sit well in the mix and pop out right where it needs to, but also feel really good under your fingers. It's really activating the amplifiers right where you wanna dig into the strings and the tone to just give it a little bit of lift here in the mids, upper mids. And you can experiment with the gain here. Generally, I find anything over 4 dB depending on the tone, can start to sound pretty brittle. Right around 2, 3, it just is an instant sparkle, an instant great addition to your tone. But we're taking that one step further here by doing a global, so to speak, input boost as well. So I'm gonna play a little bit and then turn on the filter so you can hear the difference. So because these amps are fairly clean, doing a little bit of level boost before them is actually resulting in a perceptible change in volume, as well as a little bit of gain and a little bit of EQ. If these amps were more distorted, kind of high gain amps, adding level before them really would just add more saturation to the gain structure, as opposed to bringing the level up. But here, because these amps are fairly clean themselves, we can accomplish both a little bit of gain and a little bit of actual level increase by putting this filter block before. So if AJ is back here on the drive and delay, he can kick up to a bit louder tone that has a little bit more gain, a little bit more mid happening, but isn't a very drastically different sound from his main drive sound. We didn't want a lead that came out of nowhere, so to speak. We really wanted it to be just a little bit of an additive to the already overdriven sound. This Plex delay here is absolutely beautiful, and if we actually go back to this clean here, and turn on the Plex, you can hear what you heard at the beginning of AJ's Tone Tour video where he was playing through some clean chords. Really just beautiful. So if I turn that off and we go to the drive, we can quickly check out a couple of these effects that we dialed in for various songs and then left them in this main preset as a template. We have a really nice analog stereo chorus here. And that works beautifully on the clean as well, of course. We also have a panner tremolo with the optical trim. Super organic, just beautiful tremolo, and this sounds fantastic on the drive as well. And that really rounds out AJ's main preset, which, as I mentioned before, is the template really for the entire Dashboard Confessional show. Now, there are some special effects in some other songs. For example, if I pull up Screaming Infidelities here, you see it's very much the same preset, except this Plex delay is set to the helium shimmer. So we get this shimmer sound, which is a really nice floaty effect that kind of comes out around the edges of the tone on the intro to that song. So across the set, you will find some special things like that, and Dashboard fans, of course, will probably have recognized some of those during AJ's Tone Tour video. So I hope you guys enjoyed this look into AJ's live preset. Again, there's no fancy trickery going on here. When you have a great player, it really is a science of 1,000 details, dialing in many, many very small parameters to get the preset and the sound and the tone right where that player needs it. And then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, we go through each of the songs for the dashboard set and tweak delays and reverbs and drives and tempos to suit each song, all based around this one kind of master main preset. If you guys did enjoy this video, please do give it a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe to G66's channel and leave me a comment below letting me know what you'd like to see on a future Fractal Friday. And as always, if you guys want to get the absolute most out of your Fractal units, whether that's the Axe-Fx III, the FM9, or the FM3, make sure to visit classes.coopercarter.com for my complete Fractal Audio Masterclass series. For all things Fractal Audio, keep it right here on G66. I am headed back out on the road for some more Fractal Artist production rehearsals coming up in the next week here. So stay tuned for some very special tone tours coming your way, and I will see you guys next week on Fractal Friday.